Recently, we finally got The Conjuring Last Rites, and it was the big finale to this series, kind of. Not really, but I'll talk more about that later. So I'm curious to see how these movies would be ranked, not by me, but by the public. To figure this out, I've compiled the ratings on IMDb, Letterboxd and Rotten Tomatoes to figure out how each of these movies are ranked by the general audience. So this ranking wasn't decided by me, but I'll still be giving my own thoughts along the way. And for this, I'll just be looking at the mainline Conjuring movies, not the spin-offs. So obviously spoiler warning for all 4 of those movies, but let's go ahead. In 4th place is The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. This has a 6.2 on IMDb, a 2.8 on Letterboxd, and a 68% on Rotten Tomatoes, basing that off the all audience score, not the verified audience, as not every movie has that. So still not bad despite being in last place. It's pretty middle of the road ratings overall. On the positive side, I think the plot of this one, based around a man claiming demonic possession as a defense on trial, is such an interesting story. Obviously it's based loosely on a real life case, as all of these movies are. Unfortunately, that was only a small segment of this movie, but I still find that idea really fascinating, and it sets it apart from a more simple possession haunting story because those can get quite repetitive. It has some great sequences like Arnie's possession scene with the Blondie song playing in the background that gets like distorted and you see all the lighting colours warping. It was cool to see them portray a possession from the victim's perspective. Definitely one of the scenes I remember the most when I think about this movie. That and the sequence in the woods with Lorraine piecing together what happened there. I really enjoyed that too, as well as just the continuation of Ed and Lorraine's relationship and how strong it is. However, it unfortunately didn't have the same level of scares as the previous ones. I think people were pretty clued into the style and format of these movies by this point and how they tried to scare you. So with the overuse of jump scares and less scary designs of the demons, like there wasn't really any memorable villain that came out of this one. It was definitely less effective overall. I feel like this movie has a reputation as the worst one, not including all the spin-offs, so while it's got a lot of great stuff going on, I'm not surprised it has the lowest ratings, but I still think it's a pretty decent movie overall. In 3rd place is the latest release, The Conjuring Last Rites. This one has a 6.2 on IMDb, a 2.8 on Letterboxd, so actually the exact same as Devil Made Me Do It on both of those, and a 72% on Rotten Tomatoes. So it only just edged out the last movie by a pretty small amount. And obviously this movie just came out a couple of months ago, so these ratings could still change, but I do think regardless this ranking will remain the same. I was holding out hope this movie would match the magic of the first somehow, but being honest, even before it came out I really was expecting it to get mixed ratings. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, there has already been a prequel announced, as well as a TV series. The Curse of La Llorona is also getting a sequel, even though some people don't consider that a part of the Conjuring universe. So I'm sure these are just probably a few of the spin-offs we'll get in the coming years. This movie definitely had some effective scares. For example, I think the mum seeing the ghost in the basement for the first time. The scene when he's standing still and smiling at her, that was super creepy. And then the moment with the phone cord as well, even though we all saw that coming with the way they set it up, I still thought that was a really well done scene. I also have to give props to that opening scene, which was super unsettling. The anxiety of watching a young Lorraine go through birth and then seeing that entity like crawling through the ceiling. There's a lot of good stuff going on, and I really did enjoy a lot of the scares going on in this movie. But it also had some scares that were way too over the top. The Annabelle scene, for example. I get they had to include a moment with her, of course, because it's the last movie, but seeing a giant CGI Annabelle crawling down the hallway was a little ridiculous and not really scary at all. And unfortunately those moments do drag down the whole atmosphere. It's sometimes hard after that to get wrapped back up in the tension and let this movie scare you again. Or even when the scene where the axe guy attacks Heather in the living room, while that was actually a pretty cool scene, it happened so early on and we see the full form of our villain so clearly. It takes away from the scene later on when he's doing the same thing again but with Lorraine in the basement, because we already watched him do that and the character ended up being fine afterwards. There's just not enough of a build-up. If they showed him slower, like that basement moment for example, it would have made him so much scarier, at least for me anyway. And the same goes for the old lady. She gets used in so many separate scares that she doesn't really feel like a threat at all. But if I put aside the effectiveness of the scares and horror aspect of it, and just look at the story, I actually do like this movie. I think this acting as the ending for Ed and Lorraine is beautiful. I don't even have a huge attachment to this franchise or these characters, but it was emotional watching the conclusion to this story. I also like the family in this movie, the smiles, although I feel like they're not as much of a focus, especially in the second half of this movie, even though we're literally in their house. But this makes sense to me as a finale to have the focus be mostly on Ed and Lorraine, as well as Judy and her boyfriend, who were also a big part of this movie. It seems The Conjuring Last Rites has some very vocal haters. A lot of people feel very negatively towards it, and I don't think it's as bad as some people have made it out to be at all, but I also really don't feel like it was able to come anywhere close to the stronger movies in this franchise. In the end, I fall closer to the middle and feel kind of indifferent to this movie, unfortunately. But overall, I did enjoy Last Rites and think it was a good end to The Conjuring, at least for the story of the Warrens. And in second place is The Conjuring 2. This has a 7.3 on IMDb, a 3.4 on Letterboxd, and an 82% on Rotten Tomatoes. So a pretty big step up in scores from the other two, and I'm not surprised to see it high on this list. It might be my personal favourite, but I'd have to watch them all again to say for certain. This sequel followed the case of the Enfield haunting, which is maybe why it interested me more, because it's a case I was already aware of. They definitely were able to maintain a standard of quality and scares they had set, but still set it apart from the first in a lot of ways. It's a whole different vibe and aesthetic, like the cinematography of this one is just stunning. Everything's so blue and dreary, which is set in the UK, so can confirm they nailed that part. Ed and Lorraine are perfect leads once again. The family felt relatable and the performances are really great from everybody. And it's genuinely creepy, at least it was on a first time watch. That scene where they're interviewing Janet and kind of taunting the ghost is one of my favourites.
Janet, are you alright?
Stop calling me Janet.
Then later on, the scene where Ed is trying to talk to the entity through Janet, and you can see her like out of focus morphing into the silhouette of the old man. It's really unsettling and well done. Some things do take away from that grounded scariness the first movie had for me, like the Crooked Man. Even though his design was really cool and I wish we did get that spin-off, he looks like a character from like Coraline or a kids movie for me for some reason. It's a little too like fantastical and over the top in a way that I remember kind of took me out of it the first time I saw this movie in the cinema. But that's me nitpicking a little bit, because the main villain of this movie was Valak, or the nun, and her design fit this movie perfectly and was so terrifying at the time.
Mom. Who's that?
The Nun, of course, went on to have multiple spin-off movies based around it and became one of the most well-known horror villains of this entire century, to be honest. So I don't think people really find her that scary anymore now that she's so recognisable, but this movie deserves the respect for introducing this new horror icon. It's an amazing sequel and just a great all-around haunted house movie. But in first place, not surprisingly, is The Conjuring, the original. This movie has a 7.5 on IMDb, a 3.6 on Letterboxd, and an 83% on Rotten Tomatoes. When this movie released in 2013, it was of course a huge success and obviously spanned this whole franchise that's become so recognisable and beloved, and it's well deserved. It's got so many incredible scares and sequences throughout. They just felt better crafted and less in your face, which works in its favour. Of course, the clapping game the family play and how they draw that out as a running thing throughout. Seeing those hands appear behind the mum in the basement or when they come out of the wardrobe and clap is 1,000 times scarier than seeing what's actually doing the clapping. Same goes for the laundry sheet moment, which is one of my favourites. Or the night after the daughter is dragged in her bed and says she sees something behind the door in the darkness, but we can't see what's there.
Do you see it? See what?
There's someone behind the door.
What?
I just think less is more in this case, and I find moments like those so much more chilling than any scary demon monster face they could throw at us. We still get those types of moments in this movie as well, but they're fewer and far between as opposed to later movies in the series. And even when we do eventually see the ghost later on, for example, it still feels more impactful because we spent the time building to it. And it fakes us out by having her appear on top of the wardrobe instead of inside of it. Just a great moment and an effective scare which felt really well thought out. And I think that's what makes this movie still feel like the best one all these years later. It had a creepiness to it that they weren't ever really able to fully capture again, even though we still had a ton of amazing scares throughout this franchise. I sound like a broken record, but once again the performances are incredible. Ed and Lorraine of course goes without saying, but this family also really feels so desperate and genuinely scared. Also, this was our first introduction to Annabelle, who spawned her own franchise of course, and she wasn't even really a big part of this movie, but that whole intro to the movie we get with the story of her messing with those roommates, it's kind of like its own little short film, and it's also a great introduction to Ed and Lorraine and what it is that they do. I don't think they ever could have predicted the way she became like this cultural phenomenon and horror icon, but watching it back I can see why it's well deserved. I'm pretty sure this was one of the first horror movies I actually saw in the cinema back when I was a teenager, so I definitely have nostalgia for it, as I know a lot of others do. But I do agree that it deserves these ratings and being number one spot on this list. This movie is commonly referred to as a modern classic, and I don't disagree. So that is how the Conjuring series is ranked by audiences online. Let me know if you agree or disagree with how these movies are rated and which is your own personal favourite or least favourite. I'd say it's worth noting that none of these movies are really poorly rated, which is pretty impressive to keep over a span of this many years. And I'd kind of agree that none of these movies are bad, but some of those spin-offs are pretty rough though. I'm still very much a baby channel, so this video might only get like 5 views, but regardless, if you like this and want to see more horror content like rankings or reviews, let me know please by commenting and subscribing, and thank you for watching.